Good morning, church. I thought for our Hoosier happenings, I'd just tell you that my parents are here. They're here in Indiana, and it's extraordinary. It's just great to have them. You know, we were having dinner the other night, and I talked to my mom and dad about this new sermon series, Back to the Basics. I wanted to go into what we are going into. I was afraid that maybe it might not be applicable for many of you there at Simplicity. But as I talked to them, and I talked to Jamie about it as well, and I'm getting the green light, so let's see. I know it's certainly applicable for us. Let me give you a little bit of background, and I'll tell you why. We found out last night, and I hope that our house there in Oklahoma City is almost sold. Now, I don't know. I'm certainly not counting any chickens before they're hatched, anything like this. This has been such an amazing and, to be honest with you, frustrating experience. I am just so ready to be out of that loop for a myriad of reasons. One of the big reasons is, quite honestly, is that just $2,000 a month for us. Now, I know many of you are dripping rich, but for us, $2,000 a month flowing out to cover the cost there at that house is a lot of money. I mean, my take on money has always been over the years that money's good. I enjoy money. It's good as long as you have it. You know, when you don't have it, it's not so much fun. I mean, let's back up. And maybe what I'm about to share is TMI. It's just too much information, but I think it'll help set the stage for the whole series that we're going to talk about. For years, Michelle and I followed what we've come to call over time sort of Dave Ramsey principles to finance. They really are honestly biblical finances, approach to finance. And it started back when we were first married. I mean, I'm preaching as a student, and I made $800 a month. My wife was a stay-at-home mom on $800 a month, and we would take our little money, take our little $80 tithe and take it to church, mostly because I didn't want to be a fake. I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I thought if I'm asking other people to give, you know, we needed to give. It wasn't a terribly spiritual thing for us at that point, but it just made sense. All of it made sense. We tried to give as much as we could. We tried to save just a little bit. It was just a fraction. And now we tried to live beneath our means. And to be honest with you, I look back, and we're not fancy people. We didn't drive fancy. We didn't dress fancy. We certainly didn't travel fancy. But honestly, we didn't really want to. There was a lot of peace. To jump on Ramsey's terminology, there was a lot of financial peace. Again, I'm not talking extravagance. We didn't have piles of money everywhere you turn around, but money really wasn't an issue. And on a pastor's salary, it's probably like maybe an educator's salary. You're not going to make a lot of money, but you make enough. You could make enough to take care of your family, and it was okay. And it was. It was sort of stress-free and a non-issue. Now, that's for, say, 2 years of our lives. Having just moved away from Oklahoma, I can tell you that after 3 years in Oklahoma, we now have a car payment, which we haven't had a car payment in, I can't tell you how long. And we did, again, nothing fancy. We just buy well-used, nice vehicles, but we have a car payment. We have credit card debt. Our savings is gone. That's just the depleted, that's just absolutely gone. And now we go check to check each month. Each month there's like always more month left at the end of the money than there is money. And it's just check to check to check. And you know, some of you may be wondering, well, why? Why would you do it this way? What happened? Again, I hope this isn't TMI. I mean, to say that there wasn't some personal irresponsibility involved in our current situation would be a huge, fat lie. You know, we knew that when we went to Oklahoma, we would take a huge cut in pay, which was fine. We had savings, et cetera, et cetera. But in hindsight, we didn't change our lifestyle nearly enough. You know, you pull out a savings each month to compensate for what's going on. And I've come to find out that you can put God language all over financial irresponsibility all you want. God will provide, God will provide. God, at least in my experience, does not bless financial irresponsibility. So there's some personal accountability there. Then also there is just stuff we had no control over. Medical expenses, now the house, just things that just, I don't know, it just sort of life happens. Here's the point of all this. For the first time in our lives, Michelle and I's lives as adults, we can compare these two styles. This one, what I would call sort of God's way of approaching finances. So I can show you a biblical, and I will, a biblical foundation for this, living beneath your means, living simply, living well. There's this, and then there is this business of sort of check to check to check to always wanting more and needing more and da-da-da-da-da. And these two, and Here's real simple. This check-to-check business, now that I can look at both of them, I'm experiencing both of them. Going check to check, this is deep now, but this sucks. It absolutely, again, I hope you haven't experienced, you're not, but it's just, the stress involved, it is absolutely no fun. Now again, I hope that you are solid financially. I really do, but I got to thinking, my guess is there are at least a couple of you in that room there that, like Michelle and I, are ready to get back to basics. It's like we've seen both sides now, we've experienced both sides, and we've done this long enough to realize that the answer to the problem is not more. We don't just need more. If we just have more, because more handled irresponsibly just leads to more stress. It's just time to get back to basics with finances. Now, I know, having said everything that I have so far, some of you have already locked down. There's going to be a couple of you anyway that have already locked down because you do not like talking about money in church. And I don't know, there's a couple of reasons I've found, at least in my experience, why that's the case. Sometimes people don't like talking about money in church because some idiot preacher has tried to manipulate or abuse you or a loved one with finances. And guys, if that's the case, on behalf of idiot preachers everywhere, I'm sorry. I genuinely am sorry. The other reason, I think this is more common, and I don't mean to be offensive, but I've also noticed that people get because they're handling money their way. They're going at it their way, and to be honest with you, it's just not working that well for them. It's really not. They may not be broke, they're not broke, but it just never feels like there's enough. There's always this feeling of scarcity, this creeping fear of need or not having enough. And so now you've got some guy in front of you at church asking you for some of what you don't have enough of to begin with. And there's this reaction. Either way, or maybe it's something else, I don't know. But I ask for you, please, just stay with me. Just listen to what I have to say. Because here, the thing is, we live with money every day. It's just a part of our lives. And Jesus talked more about money than he did the subjects of heaven, hell, and salvation combined. And the thing is, Jesus was never asking you for money. He was never trying to take your money from you. And so there has to be something more for him to talk about it that much. And there just is. There simply is. He asked for money one time from this guy. Now I'm thinking about this. He got a coin from a guy, used it as an illustration, and then he gave it back to him. So his agenda is not, give me, give me, give me. So, as for me and my approach, of all the years that I've pastored a church, those of you who are churched, you do those little pledge cards where you put the amount and you're going to do this. And then if you don't keep your pledge, people call you and contact you. All the years I've led a church, I've done a pledge drive twice. And it's one time was to build the building that I'm sitting in right now. And that was because the bank required us to do that. And the second time was to refinance this building that we're sitting in. Again, that was because the bank required it. Beyond that, I never have bought into those little pledge cards and the drive and the money, 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 because here's what I found. I honestly believe that people want to be generous. The people that I'm around, I'm sure there are exceptions, but the people I'm around in church, they want to be generous. If you have this big, heart-changing, community-changing, world-changing, nation-changing vision, people want to support that. They want to be a part of that. The issue is just that for whatever reason, maybe they did it, maybe it happened, they just can't support it. They're in a position where they just can't. So my approach in the past has just been throughout the year, let's just teach basic biblical principles to finance. We need to beg and squeeze and manipulate. Just teach basic Bible on this and let the rest work itself out. And I'll be honest with you, it always has. Okay, all right, let's move on. I want to begin with what I think is just a great visual. I saw this at Ramsey's down years ago in Tennessee, just a great visual of God's approach to blessing and finance. He starts with this thing. Well, actually, let's start with the 23rd Psalm. I'll put this up. Read this along with me. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I should walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I love that. Now, there's this business of my cup runs over. There's this ancient Jewish ritual called the Havladah. It's the end of the Sabbath. It acknowledges the end of the Sabbath and going back to work, but it talks about it, addresses God's blessing. And the way it goes, consider yourself the cup. You are the vessel. And into this cup pours the blessings of God. Into you pours the blessings of God. God fills you up. And then out of the overflow, your cup runs over. It's out of the overflow that you are intended to be a blessing and pour into other people. So it's this beautiful circle. Easy, beautiful, because God loves and giving and being generous blesses God. So God blesses you. Then out of the overflow, you are then a blessing and you're generous with other people. And that just, it's the way things were created to work. Now, in our culture, though, and this is just my opinion, you can disagree if you want. In our culture, that's not the way it plays out. We see it, we recognize the truth in it, yes. But what happens for us is we get close to the filling of the cup, we fill the cup, and what do? We go get a bigger cup. We're going to go get a bigger cup. I mean, we even have people will say it lacks ambition not to go get a bigger cup. Everybody needs granite countertops and seat warmers in their car. Of course you're going to go get a bigger cup. So you get this cup filled, then you go get a bigger cup. And there comes a point that you don't even need the cup to be filled. You just need to be able to afford the payments to get the, because 60 months, same as cash, is just so sweet. So you don't even have to be overflowing. We just need to think that we can afford the payments, and then we're going to get a bigger cup. And then finally, we come to here, and we've got this cup, and we're like, oh, and it works. It's great. It's absolutely working just fine. Everything is good until what? Payments, you can make your payments, everything is fine. It's working until what happens? Christmas comes along. Can you believe Christmas comes along every year? A kid needs braces, the transmission falls out, life happens, something always happens, and then you're left, it's a please, Lord, fill my cup, Lord, fill it up, Lord. It's just this constant necessity and need, and yet God is saying, guys, this is what works. I bless you. You're a blessing. Keep it simple. Keep it basic. I absolutely think that is a beautiful thing. I want to go ahead and I want to show you this biblical approach to handling money just in a step-by-step way. What you begin with biblically is giving. It starts with giving. Put this on the screen. I'll see this on the screen. Read this with me. Do good. Be rich in good works. Generous and ready to share. So step one in God's approach to handling is just giving. And that comes first. And I think, forget the whole spiritual side of it. If you're giving first and that's the way you approach your finances, to me that holds hands. It absolutely insists on holding hands with a degree of intentionality and a degree of control. Most of us want to, and the MO is that I'm going to take care of what I need, and if there's any left over, then I'll give and then I'll save. But the fact of the matter is, for most of us, there's nothing left over. Very rarely is there anything left over. God is asking you to flip this. Be intentional, take charge. You should put a name, you should have claimed and know every penny leaving your house. Give a little first. So you begin with giving. The next step is saving. Read this next text with me. Go to the ant, you lazy bones. Consider its ways and be wise. Without having any chief or officer or ruler, it prepares its food in the summer and gathers its sustenance in harvest. How long will you lie there, O lazy bones? When will you rise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the arms to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber and want like an armed warrior. Now, what I think it's funny, kind of harsh about, the Bible never directly says you need to save money. Instead, it kind of makes fun of you if you don't, which is, I guess, but there you go. So you begin with giving, and now you have saving, and then finally, you just live on the rest. Live beneath your means, enjoy the rest. Look at this verse with me in 1 Timothy. As for those who are in this present age are rich, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute, command them not to be haughty or to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but rather on God who richly provides us with everything. Look at that. Provides us with everything for our enjoyment. So there you have it. The biblical approach to handling money. You give all you can. You save all you can. You enjoy or live on the rest. You give, you save, you live. Now, how many of you know from experience that works? I wish I could be there to see heads nodding, because I know at least a few of you know that this just works. It's basic, it's simple, and it absolutely works. And yet in our culture, we've been so marketed to that we come to believe that the basics just aren't possible. If you follow a biblical pattern of handling your money, you are never going to have anything nice. You will always be doing without. You're always going to be wanting and needing a bigger cup. You know, I thought about this. I don't know where you land on this, about this whole business of the devil. I don't see him as God's evil twin or his opposite, but Jesus referred to the devil as the father of lies. And I've come to believe that there is an evil, and that evil's desire is for our misery. And one of the most significant arenas in which we're told lies has to do around money. It just jacks so many of us up. I want to show you something. We're going to turn to, if you're there with your Bibles, we're going to turn to something called the pastorals, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. We're going to go to 1st Timothy. And what this is Paul is trying to help Timothy, a young pastor. He's already set up the church. They've already got the gospel. But now the issue is, how do we actually live as Christians in this world? How do we structure the church? How do we interact with one another? How do we handle money? And these last few verses I want to show you, Paul is teaching Timothy how to instruct his people on the ways in which they interact with money. So let's look at this. We'll start with 1 Timothy 6:6, and just read this with me. Of course, Paul writes, there is great gain in godliness combined with contentment. So you read that, and I'm assuming everybody's head nods in the affirmative. Absolutely. Everybody wants to be contentment. There's great gain in godliness combined with contentment. Sounds good. Verse 7. For we brought nothing into the world, so we can take nothing out of it. That's true. Still, we're golden right there. I've never seen like a rental truck behind a hearse or anything. Brought nothing in, going to take nothing out, and we're still good. Verse 8. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with these. Now, that's a little bit closer to home to me, because I can go from 0 to want in like 60 seconds. To say that I'm just content with my food and my clothing, and obviously I've got both, certainly on the food side, but let's keep going. Verses 9 and 10. But those who want to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. And in their eagerness to be rich, some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pains. Now, I read that and I think, whew, it's an out clause. Very good, because I like money. I enjoy money. I don't love it. That's vulgar, you know? No longer applies to me. But just for general principles, let's bump on down to 17, verse 17, and read this. As for those who in the present age are rich, command them not to be haughty or to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but rather on God who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. I love that. Paul is telling Timothy to talk specifically to the people here who are rich. And there are particularly rich people in that church. And since I'm not rich, Michelle's not rich, and I know you guys aren't rich, none of us would consider ourselves to be rich. Let's talk about them for just a little bit. You've probably heard this before. I think it's wonderful. I was reading through this, but listen, there is a huge percentage of the world's population that doesn't have housing, right? And yet there are these people who are so rich, they actually have houses. They have houses in which they keep their cars. I mean, these people have cars. Can you believe, what are these things called? I can't even remember. Huh? There you go. Some people are so rich that they can look at a closet full of clothing. Most of the world might have a shirt, a pair of pants, couple, and da-da-da. They can look at a closet full of clothing and say to themselves, what? I don't have a thing to, one more. Some people I've found are so rich, and I know I'm being cute, but stay with me. I think there's a point here that they get 2 or 3 weeks off a year and are paid to take 2 or 3 weeks off a year just to do whatever they want to do. I mean, when in the world in history did that ever happen just to normal people? And then there's all this stress about what are we going to do and where are we going to go? I mean, I don't mean to be insensitive with this. I realize some of us are in really significant and stressful financial situations. And in this text that we just read here in 1 Timothy, if you had more than enough food for the day, I mean, that's what you were really praying for. You were rich. If you had more than an article of clothing, if you had more than enough food just for that day, you're rich. And again, no insensitivity. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that we live in an incredibly wealthy nation. That most of us Americans, we are rich. I know I'm being cute, but seriously, as Americans, by global standards, certainly by historical standards, we're a very rich people. And yet here's the thing. Most of us just don't feel that way. We absolutely don't feel. I think this is where the devil is involved. I really do. We are incredibly blessed. And yet, day in and day out, there's this feeling of scarcity. Talk about it. Think about this. Internationally, if you make over $37,000 a year, if your household brings in over $37,000 a year, you're in the top 4% of all wage earners in the world. If you make over $45,000 a year, if your household, you're in the top 1% of the world as far as wage earners. I think that's extraordinary. And yet, so we have so much, and yet Gallup did this survey, and just stay with me, I think this matters. Gallup did this survey, and it asked us, people who globally have a lot, what would it take for us to feel rich, for us to feel like we had enough? Listen to this. For people who had a household income of under $30,000, what they needed, what they felt like would work for them was $74,000 a year, a little over twice as much. If they had that, they'd be golden. They just needed some more. Then they asked people between $30,000 and $50,000. And what these folks needed was, again, about twice. They felt like if they had about $100,000 a year income, they'd be golden. They'd be absolutely content. And then they asked rich people, people that by any of our standards, we would think you're rich. And what they said they needed was $5 million in assets. So they had a minimum of $200,000 a year in interest income alone. I mean, that is rich. I mean, the point is that rich is like this moving target, you know? And by a biblical standard, most of us are absolutely rich. We just don't feel like it. We're never content. We're never satisfied. So what we think we need is a bigger cup. And if we get a bigger cup, then we'll be golden. All we need is more. Let me show you how God shows us. Let me show the end of this and show you how God says we're going to feel content, feel rich. Read this with me. We're almost done. Tell them the rich, that's you and I, to go after God, who piles on all the riches we could ever manage, to do good, to be rich in helping others, to be extravagantly generous. If they do that, they'll build a treasury that will last, gaining life that is truly life. I mean, so there you have it. Do you want to feel content? Do you want to feel rich, like you have enough? Then you are blessed to be a blessing. It's just that simple. And I know this is basic. It's just like that biblical approach that I talked to you about handling money. You give all you can, you save all you can, and then you live on the rest. This isn't rocket science. This doesn't shock anybody. This probably isn't new information to anybody. But again, having seen both sides of it now, the more versus God's way, I do think it comes down to just a very simple decision. Which way do you want to go at it? Do you want this? Is this going to work for you? Is it just back to the basics? You know, I don't mean to be insensitive. I think Michelle and I are living proof that you can get it right for years and slip. And some of it you probably did to yourselves. Some of it maybe, I don't know. I do know this. Either way, if you're in a situation and you're struggling, either way, there just remains this choice. The more, or the beauty and the simplicity of just the basics. You know, I can't choose for you, but I can guarantee you the way our home is going at this point. Back to the basics, guys. I love you, and I'll see you this next week.